got the right. Thank you. Thank you. Sure. Yeah.
How do have people eat them?
Yeah, you made it. Oh, they can eat your.
Oh, yeah.
I go there after class. But I think the usher finished them.
Oh, Oh, for the kids, when the kids.
Well, the
come.
kids, yeah, they get finished off during, worship. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Just a little late this morning. We've been working on Genesis 6:1-4, and what we're doing is we're taking the elements of exegesis and we've gone over those to a large degree, and now we're applying it to a passage. So last week we started with again Genesis 6:1-4. It's kind of an odd passage, and we talked about how it fits into the primeval history of ancient Israel, Genesis 1-11. It's very important we get that. We really don't get a sense of a historical time period or era until we get to Genesis 12. So when we hit Genesis 1-11, we're dealing with pretty much of a timeless narrative, I should say. And Genesis 1 is the first creation story.
What was that?
Is a first creation story, Genesis 1. We're not going to go there yet. I'm just talking in a general sense. And then Genesis 2-3 is the second creation story, and Adam and Eve in the garden. And then we have 4, which is the story of Cain and Abel. Then we get to Genesis 6 and 9 overall. I call that the flood story. But Genesis 6:1-4 is really the beginning. It takes Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel, and it sets the stage for people being on the earth prior to the flood. And if you look at Genesis 6:1, it just says people began to multiply or whatever when God, increase. Well, depending on your translation, Paul, but yeah, I'm glad you said that. When we go to the Greek, its translation says when many people, I get it, man. Should have been. And it was that when many people began to be. That's what the Greek said. When many people began to be. Yours says increase. The Hebrew word really means to multiply or to increase. Let's see what other. To be much or to be many. So we're getting to that point, and that's really what this passage is pretty much all about. Then you have verses 5-8 in chapter 6, which most scholars call the prelude to the flood story. They talk about how this multiplication, this increase of people on the earth, then they weren't all that good. In fact, they were wicked. And so that is what prompted God to say, hey, I'm going to bring about a flood. So then from 6:9 to 9:17, you have this long narrative of flood. And then we have the Tower of Babel and 11. So that is our prehistory. That's our what we call primeval history. Again, there's really no time period. Can't locate any of the things from an archaeological standpoint. And then if we do, we'll have to rethink these, but for the most part, and most cultures have a prehistory or a mythology, and that's what we think's going on in Genesis 1-11. So we've talked about that, but I think it's hopeful to begin the class with that summary to bring it together. That this is where we are. Now, what we did, any questions about that? You know, I think we're getting that, and what we did last time, and we'll finish that up hopefully today, is we're in the text and translation part. We just want to get familiar with the text. And as we read it carefully and seriously, what comes up? So we dealt with verse 1 last time, and the thing I want to stress there, I'm reading from the new RSV. When people began to multiply or increase on the face of the ground, on the surface of the ground, and daughters were born to them. Thing I want to point out there is which the Hebrew word is Adam. And that has two primary meanings to it. One, it can be a proper name, Adam. But in many cases, and it comes up at least 3 times in this passage. In this passage, it means people. New RSV says people. King James says men. New Living Translation says people. Common English Bible says people. The new NIV prior to, or at, when it was, the 2011 edition says human beings. What does the earlier edition, say, Becky, you have the earlier edition. When people or human beings.
It just says men.
Men, sure, yeah. So that would have been the earlier tradition, and that's what the earlier edition, and that's what the King James does. More of the newer translations are translating Adam as people. It means men, mankind, people, human being, whatever. That's what it means. And that's the same with the Greek word, because the Greek is using anthropos. And what word do, what discipline do we get?
Anthropology.
What discipline do we get from anthropology? Anthropology. So it's the study of humans. It's the study of men. It's the study of people. It's really what it is. So that's where anthropos. That's the Greek word that's in anthropology. So that's what this word means. Now let's get into verse 2. I think we talked about the sons of God, but I don't know that we got everything in there, or I think the class ended. So does anyone want to read that verse 2 for us?
The sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose.
Okay. Now, that's one verse, but there is some things there. First of all, who are the sons of God? We talked a little bit about that last time. Any takers?
I left early.
I did,
You left early,
yeah, there you go. Right.
I don't know.
We did the,
Yeah, so we
Look
did
at
this before
this,
you.
so none of it.
So then why aren't you volunteering?
She doesn't remember.
because he left early, he left right as we
Yeah,
were.
but she was.
Oh, well,
And then you
see,
tried to blame us that it was before.
Linda is shy.
Yes, I am, thank you.
No, we're not gonna put people on the spot here. Let's just kind of review what the viewpoints are. Sons of God. Now, Pat was raised, and she's not here, but she was raised in a Pentecostal tradition. That meant people. But what takes away from that is sons of God. The Pentecostal tradition was just translating that, well, people that God created. And this is something different because we have sons of God occur in Job and in Psalms. And in that sense, it means divine beings who are part of God's entourage. And so some people have
Angels?
Yeah, some people have said, well, what we're talking about here are angels. But the word for angel in Hebrew, it's malach, in Greek, it's angelos. Angel really has a strong connotation of messenger. So in Genesis 18, three men come to Abraham and Sarah, they're just passing through, and Abraham extends hospitality to them, but they have a message, and their message is this time next year, Sarah's going to have a son. And of course, that's either troubling or surprising to them because they're older in years,
Yeah.
especially Sarah. She's probably past menopausal age, at least as the text portrays that. So that's very surprising. But they come with a message. The angel in Matthew 1. Yeah, 18 to 15 to Joseph has a message. Of course, you think she's pregnant by another man? No, she's not. This is from God. That's the message. And then an angel goes to Mary in Luke chapter 2 and says, this is how it's going to be. You're going to have a child from God. So in this passage, the sons of God and anywhere else that it appears, it's not many, it's only in 3 places in the Hebrew Bible, they don't bring a message. They're just either there, or in this case, they see the daughters of men or the daughters of people. They see women, earthly women, and they're intrigued. So, so they don't have a message. So we're not really calling these angels. We're kind of moving into the part look of how the sons of God occur, or how that phrase appears in Genesis 29:1 and in Job 1 and 2. It means divine beings. So that's where I'm settling on. Von Rod argues that the sons of God are not humans, but the upper inhabitants who live in the heavenly world. They appear at divine councils and are occasionally sent by God to carry out definite commands. So that's what Von Rod said. If you don't know Von Rod, he was Old Testament scholar. He wrote very prolifically in the I'm going to say 40s to 1960s. So when I went to seminary, we were really we had to read a lot of Von Rod. He did a lot of Old Testament theology and the scholarship now they pick up on Von Rod, but that was a time in the 1960s when Old Testament scholarship relied a lot on the German scholarship, because they were the ones who were doing it. Now it's not, it's all over the place. British, in fact, the Brits really have picked up on Old Testament scholarship, but we have a lot of Old Testament scholars in the US who were writing, and we have Asian.
But this has been borrowing from the other religions around them. There's a lot of intermingling between the divine beings and the humans.
Yes, and we can talk about that. We'll talk about that later, but I want to go ahead here and address that. And we have that occurring when you have divine beings or gods interacting in a sexual way and marrying sometimes humans. And you have that in Greek mythology, Egyptian writings, Ugaritic, which would be in what is now northern Syria and just northern, that whole area of Canaan. And let's see, Mesopotamian, Babylon and Assyria, and some others. So in just about every culture in that area, had this going on in their mythology. In the Greek mythology, it comes up at least three times that I found in different time periods where a god marries a queen of the existing pharaoh, and they have the next pharaoh. So it isn't the human pharaoh and the human queen that has the next pharaoh. It's the divine, a divine being, a god, a moon. Usually it's a moon in the stories, a moon. And the existing queen, they have the next pharaoh. So that story crops up at least three times, probably more than that, but I found three. So that's one. In Ugaritic mythology, there's a reference of the god El marrying two human women, and they have two sons. And I don't know much more about that, but and then in Mesopotamian mythology, we've come across the figure of Gilgamesh. He's very active in their flood story and in their creation too. The goddess Ninsun has sexual relations with the human king Lugal Banda. And Lugal Banda, and they have Gilgamesh. And some people say it comes out in the mythology that he was 2/3 divine and 1/3 human. So, but he was a major character. So those are just three examples as to what Ray was saying, that this isn't unheard of. So you have this, but we got to remember, and we're not delving. We don't have the time, and I don't think I want to go there. We will if you want to. We don't want to really get too far into the mythological accounts of the other cultures, but whenever ancient Israel does draw something from another culture, especially in this primeval history, they kind of put their own stamp on it. So it's the sons of God. You don't really see that anywhere else. That's just their stamp of calling it divine beings. It's because God is more there. And in ancient Israel, you could say there's some polytheism there with the other divine beings, but God is it, and then these other divine beings are.
I'm just thinking, I don't want to be sacrilegious here, but would the Son of God have his island Mary? That's where that came from.
Probably not, because in the story, it says it's the spirit. Mary is impregnated by the spirit. So
Different Mary. Right?
No, that's the Mary I was.
Oh, okay.
As opposed to.
talk about marrying, yeah, because this is again, this is more the mythology and the primeval history. Now we're getting into times when, well, we're getting into more historic time periods. So, yeah, Paul.
So I have a New English version, a New International version.
Yeah.
And
2011.
it's a study Bible. It has an extensive footnote for this verse. And it gives varying, and I'm wondering, you know, and you probably know, and I probably should know, you probably talked about it, but what was the leaning of this particular translation? Because they come up with two different explanations that this was referring to men, good men who were the sons of God, and bad women who were the daughters of men.
Right.
That's
so we
the
get
one-
blamed
that's the one-
again.
That's the
Yeah.
one.
Okay, once
Yeah,
again, men blame the women.
Yeah.
And then the
And
other.
there's a reason why they do that, and I'll get there, but yeah, and I don't necessarily agree with it, but yeah.
And the
that's
other
good,
version,
because otherwise
another
we'll go down
plausible,
this road.
plausible version, it says that the sons of God are referring to royal figures like kings.
Yeah.
And who proudly perpetuated and aggravated the corrupt lifestyle of Lamech, the son of Cain,
Yeah,
and established for themselves royal harems. So it's referring to that as well. And it actually says these can't have been divine beings because in the order of created things, different orders didn't mix.
so they were or they were not.
They were not,
Yeah,
they were not divine, these were loyalty, more or less.
right, royalty, the sons of, yeah, and I have seen that,
It's quite a.
in some literature about, so, well, that's the NIV really. I hate to throw out labels, but I don't know how else to talk about it. Really came out of a more evangelical and conservative realm. In fact, and we did talk about that in this class, there were a lot of evangelical churches that were tethered to the NIV, but when the 2011 translation came out, it was more inclusive. Like the previous version, I think Becky read in verse 1, when men began to multiply, but in 2011 it says people. And so that turned a lot of people off. So, and my sister comes out of that tradition. She used to read the NIV. Now it's the ESV, English Standard Version. And if Joe were here, he would tell us that that is a evangelical rendition of the Revised Standard Version. So the English Standard Version, they liked the Revised Standard Version because it was of what it did with the King James. It took the King James and made it more readable. And then, but they didn't want to go as far as the new RSV, because that was already out. And so they took the Revised Standard Version, they updated that. And that's really the Bible. A lot of more conservative evangelicals at the moment. So they didn't like what happened with
Do
the NIV.
do you have any copies of the sermon? Any copies?
Of what I'm saying?
Yeah,
No, I don't.
on paper.
No, I mean, I have some notes, but I don't pass those out, and we're just, a lot of this, I'm just coming off.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. But we had, did we have a question?
What you're saying is therefore, when people say you have to take the Bible literally, this, you
Yeah.
just refuted that because it depends on which Bible.
Which
Which-
version? Yeah,
Yeah, which translation is that?
Who's translating? Yeah.
Who's translating and what's the emphasis?
and that's why we spent, I don't know, maybe 2-3 months on different translations. Because it's one thing for me to talk about the Hebrew and the Greek, and we can go there and we do that sometimes. I say, look, this is what really the Greek is. And then, but when you want to render that into readable English, how are you going to do that? Are you going to try to preserve the Hebrew syntax and word order as much as possible? Or are you going to get a little bit closer to, we call it dynamic equivalence translation, or maybe even closer to a paraphrase. And then once you start doing that, you can put any kind of spin on it you want. So that's why it's important, you know, when you choose a translation, to know what translation you're choosing. And we talked a little bit about that in the class, and hopefully you're able to make those choices for yourself. If you're not, nothing better, Joe, we'll tell you what we think. Or one of the pastors will tell you what we think about that particular translation if we know about it. And, I like to read the different translations. I have on my screen here, I have the new RSV, I have the King James. I have the New Living Translation, which is also, more conservative translations. I have the Common English Bible, I have the NIV 2011, and then I've got the Greek. So, that's all my screen will hold. So, you don't wanna have too many, then you get bogged down. But,
I recently heard a sermon by a Bethany graduate.
yeah,
Church of the Brethren pastor, who said the Bible is inerrant, it's infallible, it's without error. You can trust every word in it. How do they explain the discrepancies then?
Oh,
Factual discrepancies.
there are ways, I can poke holes in them, but they can try to poke holes in what we may be trying to do here. So, yeah, there are ways to, try to, make the Bible appear to be inerrant without discrepancies or contradictions. The way I deal with that is when we have contradictions, I've stopped using that word. It's more negative, and I think the more positive word is we have different voices. But, when someone says the Bible is inerrant, they're trying to say that's one voice, and so they have ways to do that.
I heard one of them said the original manuscripts are rightly interpreted or infallible. That the word interpreted actually trips them up, I think.
Rightly.
Yeah, so, yeah, and so it's, you have to do, I think, some intellectual gymnastics or whatever to try to get that. But they would accuse us of the same thing, or word twisting things to make the Bible to argue that it can't be totally inerrant, that there, when we say it was written by many different voices over a number of centuries, then that's why we have differences. So it's, yeah, you come out of that framework, whatever framework you come out of. There's a reason you guys, people are sitting in this class, because you have questions. Questions that really may not have been, about Craig Bank. So I don't want to ramble too much on that. I hope that helps. I'm careful not to get too far into exam, but
Sorry.
one thing, here's a good example, and I'll stop there.
Okay.
You have two creation stories. One is a very general, where God creates out of the word, Genesis 1. The second, and God is remote. God is up here and the world's down here, and it almost reads like it's narrative, but it's almost a poetic narrative. Then you get into Genesis 2. It's another version of the creation story. The order is a little bit different. And it reads as a narrative, reads as a story, more so than Genesis 1. And it has God more involved in the creation. He has more anthropomorphic characteristics. He's kneeling, he's forming. Where in Genesis 1, he speaks and it's created. Creation occurs by a word. In Genesis 2, God is more active, and he takes on more human-like characteristics. And so, and there are differences in the story and contradictions. So the answer to that is, if you don't want to say you have two creation stories, you have one creation story, and that Genesis 1 is an overall overview, and then Genesis 2 gets into some of the more details. And that's true, but that would be an explanation of the more conservative element of the inerrancy of the Bible, that no, you don't have two creations, you have one that's overall, and then. But no, these were, as I read them, two different authors. The first one much later than the second one, we could get into all that. No question for me, but I've talked to people from other viewpoints and they said, no, it's. So that's an example of how they go about creating of how they go about arguing we have an inner Bible. No contradiction. Okay. Let's keep moving. So. Where we kind of are at this point is that the sons of God are, we're going to stick with the human being or divine being with the notion that some think they were humans, could have been royalty, as Paul read from his annotated note. And some did have argued through the past that they were angels. But if we look at how the sons of God phrase is used in other places, and even how it's used here, it appears to be divine beings. So the sons of God saw that the daughters of Adam, here we are, the daughters of people, not the daughters of Adam, but the daughters of people, the daughters of mankind, however you want to translate Adam, were very good. They were good. Now, my translation says, first of all, it doesn't translate literally the daughters of Adam. It just says they, referring to the women that were born in verse 1. But the other translations of King James, the sons of God saw the daughters of men. Most translations put that. And I was curious that the new RSV updated edition said they. So they didn't translate it. It just waves in it. They go back to the women that were born in verse 1. And they were the same. But
You just said the Hebrew word meant good.
yes, okay, the sons of God saw.
The women were good, but in
Yeah.
mine it says they were beautiful.
Okay.
So to me, that's a difference between
Yes,
That's good.
good.
Yeah. In order to be good, you have to be
no,
beautiful.
there can be a difference, and
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. To me, the implication is more, they were beautiful, therefore I'm gonna marry them because they're beautiful, as opposed to they were virtuous, good people.
you know what the King James says? And you know what New RSV picked up? Fair.
Fair. They were fair.
Now that, now in King James, fair, I don't know this, but in Elizabethan English, that might have been
Beautiful.
beautiful. I don't know. I haven't gone back. It says fair. The new LT, beautiful. The CEB, Common English Bible, beautiful. The NIV 2011, beautiful. With a footnote. There's a footnote saying, oh, it's not giving you an alternate translation. So let's see. Okay, so now let's look at the Hebrew word tovah, or in this word to vote, because that's the plural.
Oh, no.
Yeah, get the brain,
You're less obedience.
yes.
I wrote it backwards, but I could because it's to vote or tovah. Yes, yeah. Well, the translations pretty much pick up on it. It can mean good, it can mean beautiful, it's fair. as long as we don't take fair to mean, average. You know, you're graded on an assignment or a test, okay, well, you did fair, and then sometimes I consider that to be below average. So, that's not what tov means, or tovah. It's, and in this sense, they're in the context suggests that they would be. So you're good to pick up on that, Peggy. Good is in a good sense, because sometimes, we'll be having dinner, and I really like it, Pat says, how is it? Oh, it's good. Good? Now, if I say, oh, it's good, she knows what I mean. If I were just say, oh, it's good.
Yeah.
Say it's fair.
No, I won't say it, I said, it's Tovah. It's the boat.
Yeah, but that'll be your next one, then we can see Pat can report back.
That's right.
And what did Dave say? It was Tova, well.
So, but just like, and we've talked about this, a lot of Hebrew words have a wide range of meanings. So in some places, the context might suggest that it's just good. In some places, this comes up a lot. Fair, form, it's just a way that they characterize beautiful women. It's the the Hebrew terminology. And this is where you have to really do a good job at translating. Fair doesn't cut it. That doesn't cut what Tovah means. So King James and then the new RSV coming up with that. I'm not too pleased with that.
But it does feel a little sexist that the men
Oh.
are sons of God
No question.
and the daughters of men. Yeah, it's just, I don't
And we're going to get into that in a little bit, where the sons of God, and maybe that is, it is here. And so they saw that they were fair, and they took.
Yeah.
And, did the,
Women have a
did
choice.
the women have a choice?
Right.
Maybe, maybe not. Maybe some of the women were honored to have a relationship with, divine beings, and maybe some didn't want to have anything to do with that.
And I'm curious about the word married,
Yeah,
that it just means they had sex with them, they could, because it's not when it says they married any of them they chose, it sounds like they might have had multiple. But it's not the marriage like we think of marriage, is it? Or at least that is what it
Well-
seems, I don't know.
it's unclear. Let me go to the Hebrew. And they took for themselves is what it
Yes,
means,
yeah.
the men, the sons of God. And it says women, and this is the plural of Isha, and it means women, and it also is translated as wives. So those translations that say they married, they're looking at this Hebrew word for women. It's not the same as daughters of men.
No.
This is actually a word that means women or wives.
But the
So
marriage back then mean the same as it does now. Or
To
you
some
stay with that
degree.
one woman, try to stay all your life,
well,
I
to
don't
some
know.
degree it did, but in some cases it did. And I remember when you say back then, when was this written?
Oh,
And
yeah.
this is a different
That's
history, but when you look at Abraham and Isaac, if someone was barren, then they would give the maidservant to the man so they could have children, but the overall thing of that is that never really worked out.
Right,
There was resentment, and so I come away from that saying, hey, that's not a good idea.
right.
And now today, we choose adoption, but they didn't. But that's not part of the story.
Yeah,
And in the King James, the word were fair, but the word were is italicized, does that mean anything or?
Yes, it does. Let me get it here.
Were fair.
yeah.
Okay, were fair.
the sons of God saw that the. I'm missing it. Oh, yeah, the sons of God saw
Daughters,
the daughters of men that they fair or they good. So what that means is that's a verbless clause. So, and so King James will do that. They're pretty good at that. When they put something in italics, that means the Hebrew word for that is not there.
Was
So the
not
word
there.
to be
Ah.
is not there. It's implied. And so when I come to a verbless clause like that, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be the verb to be. It's not going to be another verb. And that's just a characteristic of the Hebrew language. And King James likes to put that in italics. And I'm glad they do that.
Oh, yeah.
Now, other translations don't. So you're good to pick up on that. And because the literal is that the sons of God saw the daughters of Adam, the daughters of men or people, that, and then it just says that fair that, or that good thing, that good thing. And so what are you gonna do with that clause? You have to render it in readable English language. And it means they were too long, they were good. Now, we were on to something here. And they took women from all which they chose. Does that mean they took one woman from all that they chose, women plural? Or does that mean, as Karen was asking, did they take more than one? And so it's unclear. As I read this in the Hebrew, it's unclear. Now, what do the translations say? They took wives for themselves. Well, it can mean women, it can mean wives. So I see where they're going with that. All that they chose. And the King James, they took wives of all which they chose. New Living Translation, they took any they wanted as their wives. But the word here is really to choose. Common English Bible, they married the ones they chose. And
That's what he gets the implication.
Yes.
One.
and the NIV 2011 says they married as well. Because that Hebrew word for women can mean wives as well as women. Do we have any other translations? Paul, what translation? You're using NIV, yeah.
Well, yeah.
And it says married.
I have a comment in there.
Oh, all right. Well, I have that too, and that said, married as well. So.
NIV says married as well.
So what you have is one group most likely is more powerful than another. And I think that's implied. They took, wasn't a mutual attraction that we're told of. It's the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful. And so they took from any that they chose. So from several words there, you're getting the impression that it's one-sided. And it is sexist, it is patriarchal. That's the culture.
That's the way they look.
That's the culture, so you can expect that. Any other questions? That's verse 2. Now, to verse 3. Somebody read that, verse 3.
Then the Lord said, my spirit will not contend with man forever, for he is mortal. His days will be 120 years.
Then the Lord said, go. What translation are you reading, Karen?
This New International Version.
Yes, all right. Then read it again.
Then the Lord said, my spirit will not contend
Yes.
with man forever, for he is mortal. His days will be 120 years.
Okay, we're gonna have to focus on Then the Lord said, my spirit will not blank in mortals forever. Karen's translation said contend with, right?
Mhm.
What do the rest of you have?
My spirit shall not always strive.
Strive with,
For that he is all, also his flesh.
Remain in.
remain. So we have striving, contend with might be close. But remain is different.
Yes.
Mine. Abide.
Abide is remain. My spirit will not remain with humans forever. My spirit will not contend or strive with humans forever. We have anything else?
In the footnote here, it says the meaning of Hebrew uncertain.
Yes. So that's what the new RSV does. It translates it. It translates it as abide, but then it puts a footnote and says the Hebrew is uncertain. What that means is we come to the Hebrew word and we don't know how to translate it. But we have to translate. We have to. So what they probably did is they went to the Greek translation, and we don't know what Hebrew manuscript they were translating from, but the Greek uses the word to abide or to remain. Let me see that. Yeah. And another thing of the video, I won't make too big of a deal of it. And the Lord God, the Hebrew says just the Lord, or let me get that right here.
Yeah, mine just.
Yeah, the Lord.
And
But
the
the
Lord's-
Greek puts Lord God, so we,
Ah.
that could be another discussion. But I just throw that out to say that the Greek might be using a different Hebrew manuscript overall, but it's using will not remain. My spirit will not remain in these humans in eternity forever. So what's going on here? We have a Hebrew word. No. And it, as far as we can tell, it's coming from, this is a verb form from being. Just have to, you don't know Hebrew, how Hebrew works. You have a root. And then this is a form of that root, and then it leads. To judge. And there is of this word to judge, there is a meaning. Because remember, a lot of Hebrew words have different meanings. There is a meaning and it's not used very often. It's fairly rare in the Hebrew Bible, but it does mean to contend, to strive with. But when that's used, it usually means, well, 100%, it means that whatever you're striving with is more powerful than you. So this meaning, a lot of scholars don't like the meaning contend and strive with, because then you're saying that in humans, my spirit will not strive with humans forever. It's suggesting that meaning suggests that the humans are more powerful than God's spirit. Well, because whoever you're striving with or contending with, the way this meaning comes out in other places is that whatever you're contending with is more powerful. So then you're saying, well, God's saying, well, my spirit is not going to contend, with humans forever because they're more powerful. So people are less inclined to use that meaning. Some are, and some use it because they want to stay true to the Hebrew. And then what the new RSV does, well, we're gonna go to the Greek, use the word remain. And but the Hebrew is uncertain. We don't know what it means, but if we have to say it, we'll go with the Greek version, which is using the word remain. That's not in question when I read it in the Greek. It's definitely remain.
It's interesting, I have a little footnote where it says, and I just noticed this now, where it says, or my spirit will not remain in. It's interesting they didn't use that as the translation,
Right.
but the contend as the
Now, bear with me here.
footnote.
No, you don't know Hebrew, but this means to judge. This means to remain. So they're not identical. This is the word that means, or the letter that means in, so that's how you get D, and then this means door. So some are suggesting who stick with remain, that this might have been a copyist error.
Yes, yeah. I
They got them
that.
wrong, so we have that a lot when you're
Somebody's
copying
handwriting.
manuscripts, so that's another reason why people are trying to stick with. Now, this is a good example of how translating can be very, very complicated. And so that's why I'm getting into this. This could mean to judge, but it also has a meaning that isn't used very often. That means to strive with or to contend with. Some choose to go that way. Because they want to stick to the Hebrew. And then some are saying, well, no, we think the King James is actually, or the Greek is probably translating a manuscript that might have this. And that's how they're getting remain. Because others are saying, well, you can't get remain out of this, out of the judge. So you have to get it from there. And so that's why some are saying, we have no idea. We haven't a clue. Uncertain, it doesn't make any sense. But then we gotta try to make sense. So this is, I'm getting in, as much as I've researched it, these are the problems, and this is how they came.
Well, even, it's kind of inconsistent because the New International Version has two meanings for that word. Grace said that Hebrew is uncertain, that word. But then if you read further on, verse 14, my footnote says, one of the words, the Hebrew is uncertain. So why wouldn't it say here in verse 3, the Hebrew is uncertain? Or maybe they would be saying it all through the Bible.
Yeah.
Things like this, so they pick.
Okay, help me out again. What translation do you have, Ray?
New Revised Standard Version.
Okay, so he has yeah.
Well, yeah, and I see that. Well, mine doesn't say that though. The New International.
Yeah,
But later on in verse 14,
yeah.
it does say the Hebrew is uncertain.
Well, they don't wanna.
So it seems like if it's uncertain in verse 3, it would still be uncertain in verse 14. But
Well, again, that's some people, some are saying when we come to this, we don't have a clue. What the NIV is saying in the translation you're reading from, they're saying, no, we're sticking with the Hebrew. We think we know what it means. But the translators of the new RSV says, no, we don't think we know what it means. So what's uncertain to someone might be certain to someone else. And then when you get to, what was it, verse 14, let me jump down there and see if the new RSV does the same with that. But I think that's the answer to your question, Becky, is that,
But the word cypress, I mean. The meaning of that word is uncertain. Just a type of wood, what's the big deal here?
oh, well, yeah, we get that a lot with,
Yeah.
because that,
Go for work.
yeah.
I have cypress.
And this is where you can't put the cart before the horse. When we come to that Hebrew word, it means some type of wood, but we're not sure. Is it cypress wood? Is it another kind of wood over there?
So why don't they just say wood,
Go for bark.
just
Or,
do the generic.
yeah, well,
To me, this is
Yeah.
like less,
yeah, why didn't they?
well, to me, this is like, you're concerned about wood.
Yeah.
Which really is minimal instance, but when you go back, will not contend, to me, that is more important to explain that my spirit will not remain within, because that brought, so it's like what you're saying, Becky, makes no sense.
Well, it does. I mean,
Does.
it does because, yeah, we're comparing apples to oranges, different one, but you will see this with wood or even fruit. It'll be some kind of fruit and we just don't know what kind of fruit that Hebrew word is referring to. So you guess, okay, what kinds of woods are over there in that land? Some will say, well, we think this is cypress, or we think this, is gopher word the same, gopher wood the same as cypress? I don't know. So they come up with different things, and so sometimes we just have to guess. Now, we do know what the word for olive is, so when it comes to that, or grapes, we know we're talking about an olive or a grapevine. There are some things when it comes to it, sure. And then back to Peggy, we're talking about some verbs or some other things that we're just not sure about. And the difference is sometimes, this is back to Becky's original question, why in one verse doesn't, in like verse 6:3, how come the NIV doesn't say uncertain, and when it comes down to 14, it does say it's uncertain? Well, it's because in 6:3, they think they know what to, they're not certain.
Well, they have two
think they're
words.
wrong.
So I have the New English NIV as well, but again, it's a study version and it has a big footnote for that verse as well.
Okay,
And in this case, it says that the verse is obscure. So it doesn't say uncertain, but in this particular version of it, the study version, it says it's obscure. And it goes on to, one of the conclusions that they draw is that this may be referring to a period of grace from judgment that God withheld until the flood came.
Yep.
So it ties the flood in with this.
Yeah, well, I'll try to get into that in a minute. I think we have time to do that.
No,
Oh, shoot,
We're wasting.
we're wasting, we're out of time.
Two quick points. I hear about that judgment, what is it, Yadam?
You're done, yeah. It's above 4 months.
Maybe there's a way to read that so you put up, God would not put up with this for a long time, which then would lead to Noah and the flood. The other point I'd like to make is it's good that the superhumans or divine beings did get involved with the earthly women, or our gene pool would not be diverse enough to permit life to continue.
Okay, well, we have to quit, boy, I
I think we could use a few more dwelling days now,
good,
we'd improve the gene pool.
all right, we need to run here, we have love feast, and so have a good service. And thanks for the discussion, we'll pick up with 3, and where I wanna go next week is what Paul talked about, how is there some judgment here in verse 3, and the fact that it's a divine state for 1, 2, 4. It's this narrative, so God serves the speech here, so we have to talk about that.
Promise.
But we're getting there.
Yeah, this way we'll be.